Annabelle never thought anyone was watching when she cleaned the executive suites at midnight in downtown San Francisco. The 52nd floor of the Infinity Tower was always empty after business hours. Just her cleaning cart, and the view of the Bay Bridge lights twinkling through the glass walls. The city sprawled below like a constellation of dreams and disappointments, and somewhere in that sprawl was the tiny apartment in Dolly City, where her 15-year-old sister Claudia was probably still awake doing homework. Tonight, Annabelle had her earbuds in, playing old R&B tracks her grandmother used to love back in Detroit. The kind of music that made you feel things, that pulled memories from deep in your chest and put them in your hips and shoulders. She had already cleaned 3 offices on this floor, her movements efficient from 2 years of doing this exact routine 5 nights a week. But when she entered the massive conference room in the penthouse suite, something shifted. Maybe it was exhaustion. Maybe it was the full moon hanging fat and silver over the bay. Maybe it was just that she needed to feel like more than a woman pushing a cart full of cleaning supplies through empty buildings while the rest of the city slept. Whatever it was, as she wiped down the long glass conference table, the rhythm took over. Her hips swayed, her shoulders rolled. The microfiber cloth became a dance partner as she spun across the marble floor, eyes closed, feet remembering choreography from high school performances she had not thought about in years. Back when her parents were alive, and her biggest worry was whether she would get the lead in the spring showcase. Back when dance was her future, not just a memory that surfaced during lonely midnight shifts. She dipped low, came up smooth, let her arms flow like water. For 3 minutes and 42 seconds, Annabelle was not a cleaning woman drowning in medical debt and raising her sister alone in one of the most expensive cities in America. She was just a girl who loved to move, who felt the music in her bones, who remembered what joy tasted like. She had no idea that Dong-Soo Kim, the 34-year-old head of the most powerful Korean business syndicate on the West Coast, had returned to his private office for a forgotten file. His meeting in Los Angeles had been canceled at the last minute, so instead of staying overnight, he had driven back to San Francisco, arriving at the Infinity Tower just after midnight. He had used his private elevator to reach the 52nd floor, expecting darkness and silence. Instead, he heard music. Dong-Soo stood frozen in his doorway, briefcase in hand, watching this beautiful fair-skinned black woman move like water through his conference room. Her cleaning uniform, a simple navy polo and black pants, could not hide the grace in her movements. She spun and her box braids fanned out like wings. She dipped and rose with the kind of control that only came from years of training. Her eyes were closed, her face peaceful, completely lost in whatever song she was hearing through her earbuds. For the first time in 15 years of running operations that most people feared to even whisper about, Dong-Soo felt something crack open in his chest. He had seen beautiful women before. He had dated some of them, brief relationships that ended when they realized he would never fully let them in. But this was different. This woman was not performing for anyone. She was not trying to be seen. She was just purely, absolutely herself. And there was something about that authenticity that reached into Dong-Soo's carefully controlled world and rearranged something fundamental. He did not announce himself. He just watched, memorizing the way joy looked on another human being, something he had forgotten existed. His life was meetings and strategies, threats and countermoves, the constant weight of protecting his family's legacy and the people who depended on him. There was no room for spontaneous dancing in conference rooms. There had not been room for anything soft in so long he had forgotten what it felt like. But watching this woman dance reminded him. She reminded him of his younger sister, who used to dance through their childhood home in Seoul, who told him once that dancing was like praying with your whole body. His sister had been dead for 4 months now, murdered by rivals who wanted to hurt Dong-Soo by destroying what he loved most. He had not cried at her funeral. He had not cried since, but watching this stranger dance in his empty building at midnight, something in his throat got tight. When the song ended and Annabelle opened her eyes, she screamed. The cloth flew from her hand and hit the floor with a wet slap. Standing in the shadows near the doorway was a man in a dark business suit, completely still, staring directly at her with an expression she could not read. In the dim light from the city outside, she could make out sharp features, dark hair styled back from his face, and eyes that seemed to see straight through her. Her hand went to her chest, heart hammering. "Oh my God, "Oh my God, I am so sorry. I did not know anyone was here. I was cleaning. I swear I was not. I am so sorry." The words tumbled out in a rush as she yanked her earbuds out and grabbed the fallen cloth. Her mind was already spiraling. She was going to get fired. Mrs. Patterson, her supervisor, had warned her about using earbuds on the job. She was going to lose this position, and the overnight shift paid more than the day work, and she needed every single dollar to keep Claudia in their apartment and food on the table, and how could she have been so stupid, so careless? But the man did not look angry. He stepped forward into the light from the windows, and Annabelle could see him more clearly now. He was probably in his mid-30s, Korean, with the kind of face that belonged in a business magazine. Everything about him screamed money, from his perfectly tailored suit to the way he carried himself with absolute certainty. This was someone used to being in control of every room he entered. "You do not need to apologize," he said. His voice was quiet, accented, careful. "I should have announced myself. I did not mean to frighten you." Annabelle clutched the cleaning cloth, not sure what to do with her hands. "I was just finishing up this room. I will get out of your way. I am sorry for the noise." "You are a dancer," he said. It was not a question. The observation caught her off guard. "I used to be, a long time ago. The music helps pass the time while I work." Dong-soo nodded slowly, his eyes never leaving her face. There was an intensity to his gaze that made Annabelle nervous, not because it felt threatening, but because it felt like he was actually seeing her. Most people looked through cleaning staff like they were part of the furniture. This man was looking at her like she mattered. "You are very good," he said. "Thank you." Annabelle shifted her weight, desperate to escape this surreal conversation. "I should really finish my rounds. I have 4 more floors to get through tonight." She expected him to dismiss her, to return to whatever had brought him back to the office at midnight. Instead, he reached into his jacket and pulled out a business card. He held it out to her between 2 fingers. "My name is Dong-soo Kim. This is my office. If you have a moment tomorrow, I would like to discuss a proposition with you." Annabelle stared at the card like it might bite her. Nothing about this made sense. Men like him did not give their business cards to cleaning women. They definitely did not discuss propositions in empty offices at midnight. Every survival instinct she had developed in 26 years of life, and especially in the 3 years since her parents died, was screaming at her to refuse politely and get out. "What kind of proposition?" she asked carefully. "A job, different from this one. I will explain tomorrow if you call that number." He glanced at the name embroidered on her uniform polo. "Annabelle, is that correct?" Hearing her name in his mouth sent a strange shiver down her spine. "Yes, Annabelle Wright." "It is nice to meet you, Annabelle Wright. I hope you will call." He set the card down on the conference table she had been cleaning, nodded once with that same careful formality, and walked back into his office. The door closed softly behind him, leaving Annabelle alone in the conference room with a business card and a head full of questions. She picked up the card, heavy stock embossed lettering. Dong-soo Kim, Chief Executive Officer, Infinity Holdings, a phone number, an email address, nothing else. Annabelle tucked the card into her pocket, grabbed her cleaning cart, and left the 52nd floor faster than she had ever moved with a cart full of supplies. On the bus ride home to Dali City, squeezed between a man who smelled like cigarettes and a woman muttering to herself, Annabelle pulled out the card again. She had heard of Infinity Holdings. Everyone in San Francisco had. They owned property all over the Bay Area, had their name on buildings and developments from San Jose to Oakland. Powerful people. Connected people. The kind of people who did not usually notice someone like her. But he had noticed. He had watched her dance. And for some reason she could not explain, that felt more intimate than anything that had happened to her in years. Annabelle did not call the number. For 3 days, the business card sat on the tiny table in the kitchen of her apartment, staring at her while she made breakfast for Claudia, while she tried to sleep during the day before her night shifts, while she counted the money in her wallet and did the math that never quite added up. $3,000 a month from the cleaning company, minus rent, minus groceries, minus Claudia's school expenses, minus the minimum payments on the medical bills from their mother's final hospital stay, minus the utilities and the bus passes, and the 1,000 small costs of keeping 2 people alive in San Francisco. The math always came out the same, barely surviving, one unexpected expense away from catastrophe. On the 4th day, Claudia came home from school and found Annabel staring at the card again. "What is that?" "Nothing, just something from work." Claudia dropped her backpack on the floor and opened the refrigerator, frowning at the sparse contents. They were 3 days from Annabel's next paycheck, which meant 3 days of stretching what they had. Her sister grabbed an apple and bit into it, then nodded at the card. "Does not look like nothing. It looks fancy." "Some guy at one of the buildings I clean gave me his card. Said he wanted to offer me a job." Claudia's eyes went wide. "What kind of job?" "I do not know. I have not called him." "Why not?" That was the question, was it not? Annabel had been asking herself the same thing for 3 days. Why not call? What did she have to lose? But every time she picked up her phone, that voice in her head reminded her that men who handed out business cards at midnight usually wanted something that women like her could not afford to give. "Because it feels weird," Annabel said finally. "Men like him do not just offer jobs to people like me." Claudia rolled her eyes with all the confidence of a 15-year-old who thought her older sister worried too much. "Maybe he really does have a job. Maybe it pays better than scrubbing toilets at midnight. You will not know unless you call." "I do not scrub toilets. I do office cleaning." "Same thing." Claudia finished her apple and tossed the core in the trash. "You should call. What is the worst that happens? He is a creep and you hang up. At least then you will know." After Claudia went to her room to do homework, Annabel picked up the card again. She thought about the way Dong-soo Kim had looked at her, not like a man hunting for something to take, but like someone who had seen something that surprised him. She thought about the grace in his movements, the careful formality of his speech, the sadness she had glimpsed behind his eyes in that moment before he walked away. She thought about the number on the screen when their landlord had told them about the rent increase starting next month. $200 more. $200 she did not have. Annabel called the number. He answered on the second ring. "This is Dong-soo Kim." "Hi, this is Annabel. Annabel Wright from the other night. You gave me your card." "Annabel, yes, thank you for calling. Do you have time to meet today?" "I work tonight starting at 10. I could meet before that." "What about now? I can send a car to pick you up. Where are you located?" Annabel hesitated. Giving her address to a stranger felt like crossing a line. But then again, she had already called him. She had already opened this door. "Dolly City, but I can take the bus. Just tell me where to meet you." There was a pause on the other end of the line. When Dong-soo spoke again, his voice was gentler. "Please allow me to send a car. It will be easier." Something in his tone made it feel less like a demand and more like a kindness. Annabel gave him her address. 20 minutes later, a black sedan pulled up outside her apartment building, so clean and new it looked out of place among the beat-up Hondas and aging Toyotas that filled the parking lot. The driver, a middle-aged Korean man in a suit, got out and opened the back door for her without a word. Annabel had never ridden in a car this nice. The leather seats were soft, the interior silent except for classical music playing quietly from hidden speakers. They drove back into San Francisco, through neighborhoods that got progressively wealthier, until they reached Atherton, a town Annabel had only read about in articles about tech billionaires and venture capitalists. The average home price here was $8 million. The average. The car turned into a driveway that stretched for a quarter mile, lined with trees that looked like they had been professionally placed for maximum beauty. At the end of the driveway sat a house that made Annabel's breath catch. It was modern and massive, all glass and clean lines, the kind of place that belonged in magazines about how the other half lived. The driver opened her door. Annabel stepped out onto stone pavers, feeling completely out of place in her jeans and old sweater. Before she could spiral too far into her discomfort, the front door opened and Dong-soo appeared. He had traded his business suit for dark slacks and a simple white button-down, sleeves rolled to his elbows. Somehow, he looked even more intimidating in casual clothes. "Thank you for coming," he said, walking down the steps to meet her. "Please come inside." The interior of the house matched the exterior. Everything was beautiful and expensive and almost aggressively tasteful. Annabelle followed Dong-soo through a massive entryway into a living room with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking a pool and gardens that seemed to stretch forever. On the walls hung abstract art that probably cost more than her annual salary. "Can I get you something to drink?" Dong-soo asked. "Tea, coffee, water." "Water is fine, thank you." He disappeared through a doorway and returned a moment later with 2 glasses of water, ice clinking softly. He handed her one and gestured to the sofa. Annabelle sat, perching on the edge like she might need to run at any moment. Dong-soo sat across from her in a chair, maintaining a respectful distance. "I want to start by explaining why I asked you here," he said. "4 months ago, my younger sister was killed in Seoul. She had a daughter, Minji. She is 12 years old. After my sister's death, Minji came to live with me. She is the only family I have left." Annabelle's chest tightened. Whatever she had expected him to say, it was not this. "I am so sorry for your loss." Dong-soo nodded, his expression carefully controlled. "Minji has not adjusted well. She refuses to speak most of the time. She has shut everyone out. I have hired therapists and counselors, but nothing has helped. My sister used to say that dancing saved her life when she was young. It gave her a way to express things she could not say with words. When I saw you dance the other night, I thought perhaps you could help Minji in a way that others have not been able to." "You want me to teach her to dance?" Annabelle asked slowly. "Yes, 5 afternoons a week, 3 hours each session. I will pay you $3,000 per week. If Minji responds well, we can discuss a longer arrangement." The number hit Annabelle like cold water. $3,000 a week. That was more than she made in a month cleaning offices. That was the difference between drowning and breathing. That was Claudia's college fund starting to exist. That was medical bills getting paid off. That was everything. But it was also too much. No one paid that kind of money without expecting something in return. "Why so much?" Annabelle asked. "You could hire a professional dance instructor for a lot less than that." Dong-soo met her eyes steadily. "Because this is not just about teaching dance. This is about helping a traumatized child find her way back to life. That is worth more to me than any amount of money. And because I saw the way you moved when you thought no one was watching. You were not performing. You were not trying to impress anyone. You were just genuinely joyful, and that is what Minji needs. She needs to remember what joy feels like." The honesty in his voice disarmed Annabelle's suspicions. She wanted to believe him. God, she wanted to believe that someone would pay her fairly for work that mattered. That she could help a grieving child while also saving her own family from financial disaster. But the voice in her head, the one that had kept her and Claudia alive through 3 years of struggle, reminded her that things that looked too good to be true usually were. "I do not know," Annabelle said. "This feels like a lot. I am not a therapist. I am not even a real dance teacher. I just took classes in high school. I am not asking for credentials. I am asking for someone genuine who understands how movement can heal. I believe you are that person." Annabelle set her water glass down on the coffee table, her hands trembling slightly. "Can I think about it?" Disappointment flickered across Dong-soo's face, but he nodded. "Of course, take whatever time you need. But would you be willing to meet Minji before you decide? I think it might help you understand what I am asking." That felt like a trap, meeting the child, getting emotionally invested before she had made a decision. But Annabelle heard herself saying yes anyway. Dong-soo stood and led her through the house to a wing she had not seen yet. He stopped outside a closed door and knocked softly. "Minji, there is someone I would like you to meet." No response. Dong-soo opened the door anyway. The room inside was enormous, one wall entirely made of mirrors, the floor polished hardwood. A dance studio. In the corner, knees pulled to her chest, sat a small girl with long black hair falling over her face. She did not look up when they entered. "Minji, this is Annabelle," Dong-soo said gently. "She is a dancer. I thought perhaps she could visit with you sometimes." The girl still did not move or acknowledge their presence. Annabelle looked at Dong-soo, not sure what to do. He gave her a small nod and stepped back out of the room, leaving her alone with Minji. The door closed softly. Annabelle stood there for a long moment, watching the girl in the corner. She recognized that posture. It was the same way Claudia had sat in the corner of their apartment in Detroit after their mother died, curled so tight it looked like she was trying to disappear into herself. Annabelle had not known how to reach her sister then either. She had just kept showing up, kept being present, kept loving her until Claudia was ready to unfold again. Instead of trying to talk to Minji, Annabelle walked to the center of the room. She pulled out her phone, selected one of the songs from her cleaning playlist, and set it on the floor. Then she started to move. Not a performance, not trying to impress a grieving 12-year-old, just dancing the way she had danced in the conference room when she thought no one was watching. She closed her eyes and let the music guide her. She danced for one song, then another. She was halfway through the third song when she heard a small voice from the corner. "Your form is sloppy." Annabelle stopped and turned. Minji was looking at her now, eyes red-rimmed but alert. "What?" "Your form, in that turn, your arms are too loose. It looks messy." The girl stood up, unfolding from her corner with the kind of grace that made Annabelle's breath catch. "It should be like this." Minji executed the same turn Annabelle had attempted, but her version was perfect. Every line clean, every movement precise, her whole body telling a story. She was not just good, she was extraordinary. When the movement ended, Minji looked at Annabelle with something like defiance. "My mom taught me. She was a professional dancer before she had me." "She must have been amazing," Annabelle said softly. "You are beautiful when you move." Something in Minji's face crumpled. The defiance dissolved into raw grief. "She is dead. Someone killed her. I was in the car. I saw everything." The words hung in the air like smoke. Annabelle crossed the room and sat down on the floor, not crowding Minji but close enough to reach if the girl wanted to be reached. "I am so sorry. I lost my mom too a few years ago. It was different, she was sick, but the missing them part is probably the same." Minji stood very still, tears streaming down her face. "Does it ever stop hurting?" "No," Annabelle said honestly, "but it changes. It gets less sharp, and some days you can remember the good parts without it feeling like you are dying." "I do not want to remember anything. It hurts too much." "I know, but if you do not remember, they disappear twice. Once when they die, and again when you forget them." Minji made a sound that was half sob, half gasp, and then she collapsed. Annabelle caught her, this child who was a stranger but who carried the same grief Annabelle knew too well. She held Minji while she cried, great shaking sobs that seemed to come from somewhere deep and untouchable. The girl cried for her mother, for the life that had been stolen from her, for the fear and loneliness and rage of being 12 years old and having your whole world destroyed. When the sobs finally subsided into hiccups, Minji pulled back and wiped her face with her sleeve. "Sorry, I got your shirt wet." "Do not worry about it. Tears wash out." "Will you come back?" Minji asked, her voice very small. "To dance with me again?" Annabelle looked at this child with her mother's talent and her uncle's sad eyes, and she knew she had already made her decision. "Yes, I will come back." From the doorway, Dong-soo watched Annabelle hold his niece, this stranger who had done in 30 minutes what he could not do in 3 months, and the crack in his chest widened into something that felt dangerously close to hope. The first official session happened 3 days later on a Wednesday afternoon. Annabelle took the bus to Atherton, still uncomfortable with the idea of Dong-soo sending a car for her every time. She arrived at the mansion at 3 in the afternoon, when the California sun was bright and warm and made the whole property look like something from a dream. Minji was waiting in the dance studio, wearing proper dance clothes this time, her hair pulled back in a tight bun. She looked so much like Dong-soo had described his sister that Annabelle's heart ached. The girl was stretching when Annabelle entered, her movements automatic and precise. "Hey," Annabelle said, "ready to work." Minji nodded without smiling, but her eyes were clearer than they had been during their first meeting. That felt like progress. For the next 3 hours, Annabelle led Minji through basic exercises, relearning the foundation that the girl already knew but had abandoned in her grief. It was clear within the first 15 minutes that Minji had extensive training. Her muscle memory was impeccable, her understanding of technique far beyond what Annabelle had expected. But there was no joy in her movements. Everything was technically perfect and emotionally hollow, like watching a robot perform choreography. Annabelle had seen this before, in herself, in those first months after her parents died, when she tried to keep dancing, but found that all the feeling had leaked out of her body. Halfway through the session, Annabelle stopped the music. "Minji, can I ask you something?" The girl lowered her arms from fifth position. "Okay. Why did you love dancing? Before everything happened, what made it special for you?" Minji was quiet for a long moment. "My mom said dancing was like speaking a language that everyone could understand, even if they did not know the words. She said when you dance, you tell the truth with your whole body and you cannot lie." "That is beautiful. Do you still believe that?" "I do not know what I believe anymore." Annabelle sat down on the studio floor and patted the space next to her. Minji hesitated, then sat down too, crossing her legs. They sat in silence for a moment, just breathing, the afternoon light streaming through the windows and painting everything gold. "After my parents died, I could not dance for almost a year," Annabelle said. "Every time I tried, it felt wrong, like I did not deserve to feel good about anything when they were gone. Does that sound familiar?" Minji nodded, her eyes filling with tears. "Every time I dance, I think about my mom, and it hurts too much. What if we danced for them instead of without them? What if we moved in a way that said, 'Thank you for teaching me this. Thank you for sharing this gift with me'? What if dancing was how we kept them alive?" The concept seemed to settle over Minji like a new skin. She wiped her eyes and stood up, extending her hand to Annabelle. "Can we try?" They danced for another hour, but this time Annabelle encouraged Minji to let the emotion in, to remember her mother while she moved, to let the grief and love and anger flow through her body instead of holding it all locked away. At first, Minji was tentative, scared to feel too much. But as the music swelled and Annabelle danced beside her, the girl began to open up. What emerged was breathtaking. Minji moved with a raw intensity that made Annabelle want to cry. Every gesture was infused with meaning, every turn a declaration. This was not just technical excellence. This was art. This was a 12-year-old girl screaming and weeping and loving through movement, telling the story of her mother and her loss and her survival. When the music ended, both of them were breathing hard, sweat dampening their clothes. Minji looked at Annabelle with wide eyes. "I felt her. When I was dancing, I felt my mom with me." "She is always with you," Annabelle said, "especially when you dance." The door to the studio opened, and Dong-soo appeared, carrying a tray with tea and fruit. He had started doing this, bringing them refreshments during their sessions, lingering to watch for a few minutes before disappearing again. But today, his eyes were shining in a way Annabelle had not seen before. "You two were incredible," he said, setting the tray down on a small table near the mirrors. "Minji, I have not seen you dance like that since before." He did not finish the sentence, but he did not need to. Minji ran to him and threw her arms around his waist. Dong-soo held his niece, one hand cupping the back of her head, and over her shoulder, he looked at Annabelle with an expression that made her stomach flip. It was gratitude and wonder and something else, something warmer and more dangerous. That became the pattern. 5 afternoons a week, Annabelle took the bus to Atherton and spent 3 hours with Minji in the dance studio. The girl blossomed under the attention, slowly returning to herself. She started talking more, smiling occasionally, even laughing during their warm-up exercises when Annabelle told stories about the ridiculous things she had seen while cleaning office buildings at night. And Dong-soo was always there, orbiting their sessions like a moon around a planet. He brought them food and drinks. He watched from the doorway, his expression softening when Minji executed a difficult combination. He asked Annabelle about her day, about her sister, about her life before this strange arrangement brought her into his world. The conversations started short and professional, but they grew longer and more personal. Annabelle learned that Dong-soo had taken over his family business at 22 when his father had a stroke, that he had spent the last 12 years building something he could be proud of, trying to move away from the gray areas his family had historically operated in, that his sister had been his best friend and her death had broken something in him he was not sure could be fixed. In return, Annabelle told him about growing up in Detroit, about her parents who worked 2 jobs each to keep their family afloat, about the car accident that killed them both when Annabelle was 23 and suddenly responsible for a 12-year-old sister, about moving to San Francisco because she thought a new city might hurt less than staying in the place where everything reminded her of what she had lost. One evening, about 6 weeks into their arrangement, Dong-soo asked if she would stay for dinner. Just the three of them, he said. Something like a family. Annabelle knew she should say no. The boundaries between employer and employee had already gotten fuzzy, and dinner felt like crossing a line they could not uncross. But Minji grabbed her hand with hope shining in her eyes, and Annabelle found herself saying yes anyway. They ate Korean barbecue at the massive dining table that could seat 20, but tonight held only 3. Dong-soo cooked at the table, grilling meat and vegetables with practiced ease, while Minji told Annabelle about her school in Seoul, about her friends she missed, about the dance academy where her mother had trained. The girl was more animated than Annabelle had ever seen her, gesturing wildly with her chopsticks, almost like a normal kid instead of a trauma survivor. Across the table, Dong-soo watched Annabelle with an expression that made her heart beat faster. There was something in his eyes, a warmth and attention that felt like more than gratitude. When their hands accidentally touched reaching for the same dish, neither of them pulled away immediately. The contact lasted 3 seconds too long to be accidental. After dinner, Minji went upstairs to do homework, and Dong-soo walked Annabelle to the front door. His driver was waiting to take her home, the same routine as always. But at the door, Dong-soo touched her arm gently. "Thank you," he said. "Not just for what you are doing with Minji, but for being here, for making this house feel less empty." Annabelle looked up at him, at this man who carried so much weight on his shoulders, who had lost his whole family except for one grieving niece, who somehow made her feel seen in a way she had not felt in years. "You are paying me very well for it. I would pay you twice as much if it meant you would stay." The air between them thickened with something unspoken. Annabelle knew she should step back, should put distance between them, should remember that this was a job, and he was her employer, and mixing those things up led nowhere good. But she did not step back. She stayed exactly where she was, close enough to feel the warmth coming off his body, close enough to see the way his pupils dilated when he looked at her. "I should go," she said, but she did not move. "Yes," Dong-soo agreed, but he did not move either. They stood there for a moment that stretched too long, balanced on the edge of something neither of them was ready to name. Finally, Annabelle forced herself to step back. "Good night, Dong-soo." "Good night, Annabelle." She got in the car and did not look back, but she could feel his eyes on her all the way down the long driveway. On the drive back to Dali City, her phone buzzed with a text from Claudia. "You are late. Everything okay?" Annabelle stared at the message, thinking about how to answer that question. Everything was not okay. She was falling for her employer, a man who lived in a completely different world, whose life was complicated in ways she did not fully understand. A man who had hired her to help his traumatized niece, not to develop feelings for him. But when she closed her eyes, she saw the way Dong-soo had looked at her across the dinner table, like she was the most fascinating person he had ever met. She felt the ghost of his touch on her arm, gentle and warm. She remembered the sound of his laugh when Minji had made a joke about Annabelle's terrible Korean pronunciation. "Everything is fine," she texted back. "Just had dinner with work people, home soon." It was not a lie, exactly, but it was not the truth either. The truth was that Annabelle was in trouble, the kind of trouble that started with late-night conversations and shared glances and ended with someone getting hurt. She just was not sure anymore if she cared. Life settled into a rhythm that felt almost normal. Annabelle cut back her cleaning shifts to 3 nights a week, since the money from teaching Minji more than covered her expenses. Claudia noticed the change, noticed that Annabelle seemed lighter somehow, that she smiled more and stressed less. Her sister asked questions, but Annabelle deflected them. How could she explain what was happening when she did not fully understand it herself? The sessions with Minji continued to go well. The girl was thriving, her personality emerging more each week. She started joining her school's dance program, making friends for the first time since moving to America. She talked about her mother without breaking down. She laughed. She healed. And Annabelle fell deeper into something she could not name. Dong-soo found more and more reasons to be home during her afternoon visits. They would have tea together after Minji's sessions, sitting in his study while the sun set over the gardens. He told her about his work, the legitimate business ventures he was building, the shipping and logistics empire he was trying to transform into something completely clean. He talked about the past too, about the parts of his family history that made him uncomfortable. His grandfather had built their wealth through connections and deals that existed in gray areas of the law. His father had continued that tradition. Dong-soo had spent the last 5 years trying to separate the family business from those old ties, to build something his niece could inherit without shame. But there were people who did not want him to succeed. Rivals who benefited from the old chaos, who saw Dong-soo's push for legitimacy as weakness. His sister's death had not been random. It had been a message from one of those rivals, a man named Kang-dee Park, who ran a competing organization out of Los Angeles. Park blamed Dong-soo for his brother's arrest 3 years ago on fraud charges. Dong-soo had provided evidence to federal investigators as part of his effort to distance himself from the criminal elements of their shared industry. Park's brother was serving 15 years in federal prison because of that evidence. "He wants revenge," Dong-soo told Annabelle one evening, his voice heavy. "And he knows the best way to hurt me is to destroy what I love." "Is that why you have so much security?" Annabelle asked. She had noticed the men in dark suits who patrolled the property, the cameras everywhere, the way Dong-soo's driver always checked under the car before they got in. "Yes, I will not lose anyone else, I cannot." The conversation left Annabelle uneasy, but she pushed the feeling aside. Dong-soo's world was not her world. She was just the dance teacher. The threat he described felt abstract, like something from a movie, not real life. That illusion shattered on a Thursday afternoon in late October. Annabelle had just finished her session with Minji and was gathering her things when her phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. She opened it without thinking. The message was simple: "Stop working for the Kim family, or there will be consequences." Attached was a photo of Claudia leaving school, her backpack over one shoulder, completely unaware she was being photographed. Annabelle's blood turned to ice. Her hands shook so badly she almost dropped the phone. Minji was still in the studio, cooling down from their session, chattering about a dance competition her school was planning. Annabelle forced herself to stay calm, to not scare the girl, but inside she was screaming. She made an excuse about needing to make a phone call and stepped into the hallway. With trembling fingers, she called Dong-soo. He answered immediately. "Annabelle, is everything okay?" "No," her voice cracked. "Someone just sent me a message. They told me to stop working for you. They sent me a picture of my sister." Silence on the other end of the line, but it was not the silence of surprise. It was the silence of someone whose worst fears had just been confirmed. "Where are you right now?" "In your house. Minji is in the studio." "Stay there. Do not leave the property. I am 10 minutes away." He hung up before she could respond. Annabelle leaned against the wall, fighting the urge to vomit. Someone had photographed her baby sister. Someone was threatening Claudia because of Annabelle's connection to Dong-soo. This was real. The danger he had described was not abstract anymore. It was a photo on her phone and a threat that made her skin crawl. She called Claudia. Her sister answered on the third ring, sounding annoyed. "What? I am studying." "Where are you right now?" "At home. Why?" "Stay there. Lock the door. Do not leave for any reason until I get there. Do you understand?" "Annie, you are freaking me out. What is going on?" "Just do what I say, please. I will explain when I get home." She hung up and called her supervisor at the cleaning company, quit effective immediately, did not offer an explanation. Then she stood in the hallway of Dong-soo's mansion, hugging herself, trying to stop shaking. Dong-soo arrived in less than 10 minutes, moving through his house with controlled urgency. He found Annabelle in the hallway and immediately pulled her into his study, closing the door behind them. "Show me the message." She handed him her phone. He read it, his expression darkening. "This is Kang-dee Park. This is how he operates, threats against family." "What does he want?" "To isolate me, to take away everyone I care about so that I have nothing left to lose and make stupid decisions. He knows that you are important to Minji, and he knows." Dong-soo stopped, his jaw tightening. "He knows what?" Annabelle asked. "He knows that you are important to me." The admission hung between them, everything they had been dancing around for weeks suddenly spoken out loud. Annabelle wanted to ask what he meant, wanted to push him to say it clearly, but there was no time. Her sister was in danger. "What do I do?" Annabelle asked. "I have to keep Claudia safe." "You are both coming here. Tonight, I will have my security team bring your sister and whatever belongings you need. You will stay in the guest house until this is resolved." "I cannot just move into your house." "You can and you will." His voice was hard now, the voice of a man who was used to being obeyed. "I have already lost my sister because I underestimated Park. I will not lose you too." "I am not yours to lose," Annabelle said, but the words came out weak. They both knew she was lying. Dong-su stepped closer, close enough that she had to tilt her head back to meet his eyes. "Annabelle, please, let me protect you. Let me keep you and your sister safe." She should have said no. She should have grabbed Claudia and disappeared, left San Francisco entirely, started over somewhere Park could not find them. But looking at Dong-su, at the desperation in his eyes, at the way his hands were clenched into fists like he was physically restraining himself from reaching for her, Annabelle knew she was not going anywhere. "Okay," she whispered. "Okay." The relief that washed over Dong-su's face was so profound it hurt to witness. He pulled out his phone and made 3 calls in rapid Korean, giving orders to people who responded with immediate compliance. Within an hour, 2 of his security team were at Annabelle's apartment in Dali City. Claudia called, confused and scared, and Annabelle tried to explain without explaining too much. Her sister was 15, not stupid. She knew something serious was happening. By 8 that evening, Claudia and 3 suitcases of their belongings arrived at the Atherton mansion. The guest house was bigger than their entire apartment, a self-contained unit with 2 bedrooms, a kitchen, and a living room. Minji helped Claudia unpack, excited to have someone her age around, chattering about the pool and the game room and all the things they could do together. Annabelle stood in the doorway watching her sister settle into this surreal new reality, and Dong-su stood beside her, his presence solid and reassuring. "She will be safe here. You both will." "How long do we have to stay?" "Until Park is neutralized. I am working on it." "What does that mean?" Dong-su looked at her with eyes that held secrets and strategies she could not fully comprehend. "It means I am going to end this. Permanently. He came after my family. He threatened you. He made this personal, and I am going to make sure he regrets it." The coldness in his voice should have scared her. Instead, it made her feel safe. This was a man who protected what was his with absolute conviction, and somehow, without either of them planning it, Annabelle had become his to protect. That night, after Claudia fell asleep in her new bedroom and Minji was settled in the main house, Annabelle stood in the guest house living room staring out at the illuminated gardens. She heard the door open behind her, knew without turning that it was Dong-su. "You should rest," he said softly. "It has been a long day." "I cannot stop thinking about that photo of Claudia, about what could have happened if I had not gotten that warning." Dong-su crossed the room to stand beside her. "Nothing will happen to her. I have security on her 24 hours a day now. No one will get close enough to even take another photograph." "You cannot promise that." "Yes, I can." He turned to face her fully. "Annabelle, I know this is not the life you signed up for. You came here to teach my niece to dance, and instead you are hiding in my guest house because my enemies want to use you against me. You have every right to be angry. You have every right to blame me for putting you in this position." "I do not blame you," Annabelle said, and she realized it was true. She did not blame him for the violence of his world, for the enemies he had inherited, for the danger that came with his name. "I just wish." "What do you wish?" She turned to meet his eyes, and the intensity there took her breath away. "I wish we had met differently, in a world where you were just a man and I was just a woman, and this could be simple." "It is simple," Dong-su said, stepping closer. "I am falling in love with you. That part is the simplest thing in my life right now." The words landed like an earthquake, rearranging everything Annabelle thought she understood about their relationship. She opened her mouth to respond, but before she could form words, Dong-su was kissing her. His hands cupped her face gently, his lips warm and certain against hers, and Annabelle forgot every reason this was a bad idea. She kissed him back, her hands fisting in his shirt, pulling him closer. He tasted like the tea they had shared that afternoon, familiar and perfect. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Dong-su rested his forehead against hers. "I will keep you safe," he whispered. "Whatever it takes, I promise you." Annabelle wanted to believe him. Standing in his arms, feeling the solid warmth of his body against hers, she almost could. But somewhere in the back of her mind, a voice whispered that some promises were impossible to keep, no matter how much you meant them. Living in the guest house felt like existing in a beautiful bubble that could pop at any moment. Annabelle and Claudia fell into a routine. Claudia was driven to school by Dong-su's security team each morning and picked up each afternoon. She thought it was excessive and embarrassing, but she also understood that it was not negotiable. Minji and Claudia became fast friends despite the age difference, bonding over music and dance, and the shared experience of having their lives turned upside down by circumstances beyond their control. Annabelle continued teaching Minji, but now the sessions happened in the safety of the estate with guards patrolling the perimeter. The normalcy of their dance work felt surreal against the backdrop of the threat hanging over them. But it also felt necessary, like creating pockets of beauty and joy was an act of resistance against the people who wanted to destroy them. And then there was Dong-su. After that first kiss, everything changed between them. He did not hide his feelings anymore. He would find her in the guest house late at night after Claudia was asleep, and they would talk for hours about everything and nothing. He told her about his childhood in Seoul, about the pressure of being the eldest son in a powerful family, about his dreams of building something legitimate that his future children could inherit without shame. Annabelle told him about her parents, about the way her father sang while cooking breakfast and her mother danced in the kitchen when she thought no one was watching, about how much she missed them, how the grief had changed shape over the years but never really left, about her fears that she was not enough for Claudia, that she was failing at the job of being a parent when she was barely an adult herself. "You are more than enough," Dong-su said one night as they sat together on the couch in the guest house, her head resting on his shoulder. "Look at what you have done. You kept your sister fed and housed and safe in one of the most expensive cities in the country. You gave up your own dreams to make sure she could have hers. You are exactly what she needs. Sometimes I wonder what my life would look like if they had not died. If I had finished college, if I had kept dancing seriously. If I was not responsible for another human being before I figured out how to be responsible for myself. Do you regret it?" Annabelle thought about that question honestly. "No, I love Claudia. I would make the same choice again. But that does not mean I do not mourn what I lost." Dong-su kissed the top of her head. "You will dance again, professionally if you want. I will make sure of it. You cannot just fix everything with money." "Maybe not, but I can give you space and time and resources to pursue what makes you happy. That is what people who love each other do." The casual way he said it, like loving her was just a fact of his existence now, made Annabelle's chest tight. She turned to look at him. "You really love me." "Yes, I tried not to. This would all be simpler if I could keep you at a professional distance. But watching you dance that first night broke something open in me, and then you helped Minji when no one else could, and then you smiled at me over dinner and I knew I was lost. So yes, Annabelle, right? I love you. Completely and probably foolishly, but I do." She kissed him then, a kiss that started soft and turned desperate, both of them trying to prove through touch what words could not fully capture. When they finally broke apart, Annabelle whispered against his lips, "I love you too. I do not know when it happened, but I do." The joy on Dong-su's face made him look 10 years younger. He pulled her back in for another kiss, and they stayed tangled together on the couch until nearly dawn, learning the geography of each other's bodies, whispering promises and hopes into the quiet. But the bubble could not last forever. 2 weeks into their stay at the estate, the threats escalated. Someone vandalized the entrance gate, spray painting a message in Korean that made Dong-su's security team tense. He would not tell Annabelle what it said, just that Park was getting bolder. The attempts at intimidation became more frequent. Suspicious cars would park outside the property. Threatening messages came through encrypted channels. Dong-su's business associates started backing away from deals, citing concerns about instability. Annabelle watched the man she loved carry the weight of this war, watched it etch new lines into his face. He barely slept, spending most nights in his office making calls and reviewing security footage. She tried to help, but there was nothing she could do against an enemy she could not see or understand. Then came the day that changed everything. Annabelle was in the main house helping Minji prepare for a dance showcase at her school when Dong-su's head of security, a stern man named Mr. Cho, came to find them. His face was grim. "We need to move you to the safe room, now." "What happened?" Annabelle asked, her heart already racing. "Someone breached the outer perimeter. We do not know how many or if they are armed. It is probably a scare tactic, but we are not taking chances." Minji grabbed Annabelle's hand, her eyes wide with fear. Claudia appeared from the game room where she had been watching TV, already picking up on the tension. Mr. Cho led all three of them through the house to a section Annabelle had never seen, a reinforced room in the basement with its own air supply and communication systems. "Stay here until I come back for you," Mr. Cho said. "Do not open this door for anyone but me or Mr. Kim." The heavy door closed, and Annabelle heard locks engaging. She pulled both girls close, trying to project calm she did not feel. "It is going to be okay. This is just a precaution." "This is because of Uncle's business, is it not?" Minji said quietly. "Because of the people who killed my mom." Claudia looked at Annabelle with betrayal in her eyes. "You said we were safe here. You said nothing would happen." "I know. I thought we would be." They sat in that safe room for 3 hours. Annabelle tried to distract the girls with word games and stories, but fear hung thick in the air. Every sound from above made them jump. Annabelle kept checking her phone, but there was no signal in the basement. They were completely cut off. Finally, the locks disengaged and the door opened. Dong-su stood there, a cut above his eyebrow that was already bruising, his shirt torn. But he was alive and whole, and that was all that mattered. Annabelle ran to him, and he caught her, holding her tight. "It is over. They are gone. Everyone is safe." "What happened?" "Park's men tried to breach the property. My security stopped them. No one was seriously hurt, but this cannot continue. He is getting bolder. Next time he might succeed." That night, after the girls were finally asleep and Annabelle had checked on them 3 times to reassure herself they were okay, she found Dong-su in his office. He was on the phone speaking rapid Korean, his voice hard and cold. When he saw her in the doorway, he ended the call. "You should be resting," he said. "So should you. When is the last time you slept?" "Sleep is not a priority right now." Annabelle crossed the room and took the phone from his hand, setting it on the desk. Then she cupped his face, forcing him to look at her. "You cannot protect us if you collapse from exhaustion. You are human, Dong-su. You have limits." "My limits do not matter. Keeping you safe matters. Keeping Minji and your sister safe matters. Nothing else." "We cannot live like this," Annabelle said softly. "Hiding in safe rooms, jumping at every sound. This is not sustainable. Something has to change." "I know." He leaned into her touch, closing his eyes. "I am working on it. I promise you this will end soon." "How?" When he opened his eyes, there was something dangerous in them, something that reminded Annabelle that Dong-su came from a world where problems were solved through means she did not want to think about. "By making sure Kangdi Park can never threaten anyone I love again." The certainty in his voice should have comforted her. Instead, it made her afraid, not of Dong-su, but of what he might have to become to keep them safe. She had fallen in love with the man who brought tea to dance rehearsals and helped his niece with homework. But there was another side to him, the side that had built and maintained an empire in a dangerous world. She was seeing that side now, and it scared her how easily he wore it. "Do not become like them," she whispered. "Do not let them turn you into something you are not." "I am already something you do not fully know," Dong-su said. "I have done things I am not proud of to protect my family and my business. I am not a good man, Annabelle. I am just a man who is trying to be better. But if being better means losing you, then I will choose being what I need to be to keep you alive." She kissed him then, tasting desperation and determination on his lips. "I do not need you to be good. I just need you to be you. The man who loves his niece enough to hire a stranger to teach her to dance. The man who noticed me when everyone else looked through me. That is who I love. Do not lose that person in this war." "I will try," he promised. But they both knew that in war, good intentions did not always survive contact with reality. The attack on the estate changed everything. Dongsu's security was doubled, the property turned into a fortress. But the real change was internal. Dongsu became harder, colder, spending every waking hour strategizing how to end the threat from Park. Annabelle watched the man she loved disappear into the warrior his world required him to be, and she did not know how to bring him back. Minji sensed the shift too. Her uncle was present but distant, his mind always elsewhere. The girl threw herself into dance with renewed intensity, using movement to process the fear of living under siege. Claudia adapted with the resilience of teenagers, making the best of their surreal situation, but Annabelle saw the strain in her sister's eyes. 3 weeks after the breach, Dongsu called a meeting with his inner circle in his home office. Annabelle was not invited, but she could hear the raised voices from where she sat in the guest house. An argument in Korean, sharp and heated. When Dongsu finally came to find her that evening, he looked exhausted. "What happened?" she asked. "We have a problem. Someone in my organization has been feeding information to Park. That is how his men knew the best time to attack. That is how they have been staying one step ahead of my countermoves. There is a traitor." The word hung heavy in the air. "Do you know who?" "Not yet, but I will find out." It took 4 more days of investigation, of reviewing security footage and communication logs and financial records. When they finally identified the leak, the revelation was devastating. It was Sung-ho, Dong-su's head of operations, a man he had worked with for over a decade. A man he trusted with his life. Annabelle was in the dance studio with Minji when Mr. Cho came to get Dong-su from where he had been watching their session. The look on the security chief's face made her stomach drop. Something had happened. Dong-su followed Mr. Cho out, and 20 minutes later, Annabelle heard shouting from the main house. She left Minji practicing and went to investigate. In Dong-su's office, she found chaos. Sung-ho was there, flanked by security guards, his face pale and defiant. Dong-su stood behind his desk, fury rolling off him in waves. 8 months, Dong-su was saying in English, probably for Annabelle's benefit. "You have been selling me out for 8 months. How much did he pay you? How much was my sister's life worth to you?" "You do not understand," Sung-ho said, his accent thick. "You do not see what you have become. You used to understand that our world has rules. You cannot just decide to go legitimate and expect everyone to follow. Some of us built our lives on the old ways. You were destroying that. So you helped murder my sister. You endangered my niece. You gave Park the information he needed to attack my home." "I gave him information. What he did with it was his choice." Dong-su moved so fast Annabelle barely saw it. One moment he was behind his desk, the next he had Sung-ho slammed against the wall, forearm across his throat. The security guards did not intervene. They just watched, stone-faced. "You are going to tell me everything," Dong-su said, his voice deadly quiet. "Every piece of information you gave Park, every plan he is working on, every weakness in his organization that you know about. You are going to give me the tools to destroy him completely. And if you cooperate, I might let you leave this country alive." Annabelle wanted to look away, but she could not. This was the side of Dong-su she had been afraid to see, the part of him that came from a world where betrayal was answered with violence. But she also understood his rage. Sung-ho had helped kill his sister, had put Minji in danger, had threatened everything Dong-su was trying to protect. Over the next hour, Sung-ho talked. He gave them everything, every detail of his communications with Park, every piece of intelligence he had passed along, and most importantly, the information about Park's own organization that Sung-ho had gathered as insurance. Names, locations, financial records, evidence of crimes that could put Park and his top associates away for life. When it was done, Dong-su had Mr. Cho escort Sung-ho to a secure location. Not to be killed, despite Annabelle's fears, but to be held until Dong-su decided what to do with him. The man who had betrayed them was no longer a threat, but the information he had provided was gold. That night, Dong-su came to the guest house later than usual. Annabelle was waiting up, unable to sleep while her mind replayed the scene from his office. When he walked in, she saw how much the day had cost him. His shoulders slumped with exhaustion, his eyes hollow. "Are you okay?" she asked. "No," Someone I trusted for over 10 years helped murder my sister and endangered everyone I love. I am very far from okay. Annabelle went to him, pulling him into her arms. He held her like she was the only solid thing in a world that had turned liquid and dangerous. What happens now? Now I use what Sung-ho gave me to end this. Park thinks he is winning this war. He thinks I am weak. That going legitimate made me soft. I am going to show him exactly how wrong he is. What are you going to do? Dong-soo pulled back to look at her, his expression grim. I am going to Los Angeles. I am going to meet with federal investigators who have been building a case against Park for years. I am going to give them everything Sung-ho told us, plus information from my own sources. And I am going to make sure Kangdi Park spends the rest of his life in a federal prison, just like his brother. Is that safe, going to LA, meeting with federal agents? Probably not, but it is the only way to end this without more bloodshed. I could handle Park the old way, but that would just perpetuate the cycle. I want out of that world, Annabelle. I want to build something clean. This is how I do it. I cooperate with law enforcement, I take down the people who will not let me leave, and I prove that I am serious about change. It made sense strategically, but the thought of Dong-soo walking into Park's territory made Annabelle's skin crawl. Let me come with you. Absolutely not. I need you here where you are safe. I need you with Min-ji and Claudia. I need to know that if something goes wrong, you will take care of my niece. Nothing is going to go wrong. I hope not, but hope is not a strategy. Promise me, Annabelle. Promise me that if something happens to me, you will stay in Min-ji's life. She needs you. She loves you. Tears burned Annabelle's eyes. Do not talk like that. You are coming back. Promise me anyway. Fine, I promise. But you are coming back. You are not allowed to make me love you and then disappear. Dong-soo cupped her face in his hands, his thumbs brushing away the tears that had started to fall. I love you. If I have not said it enough, I am saying it now. You walked into my building at midnight and reminded me what beauty looked like. You brought joy back into my niece's life. You made me believe I could be more than what my family history said I had to be. You are everything good that has happened to me in the last year, and I will fight with everything I have to come back to you. They made love that night with a tenderness edged with desperation, both of them trying to memorize the feel of each other's skin, the sound of each other's breathing. Afterward, Annabelle lay in Dong-soo's arms and watched the sky outside the window slowly lighten from black to gray to pink. She did not sleep. She just held him and prayed to a God she was not sure she believed in anymore that he would keep his promise to come back. When Dong-soo left for Los Angeles the next morning, Annabelle stood in the driveway and watched his car disappear down the long drive. Min-ji stood beside her, silent and scared. Claudia was on Annabelle's other side, holding her hand. He will be okay, right? Min-ji asked. Yes, Annabelle said, putting every ounce of certainty she did not feel into that single word. He will be okay, he promised. But as the days stretched into a week with only brief, cryptic text messages from Dong-soo saying he was fine, Annabelle's certainty began to crumble. She kept teaching Min-ji, kept going through the motions of normal life, but inside she was screaming. She had let herself love someone, had let herself believe in something good, and now that person was in danger and there was nothing she could do to help him. On the 8th day, Dong-soo's phone went dark. No messages, no calls. When Annabelle tried to reach him, it went straight to voicemail. Mr. Cho assured her this was normal, that Dong-soo was probably in deep negotiations with federal agents and could not risk communication. But the look in the security chief's eyes said he was worried too. Annabelle tried to keep it together for the girls, but Min-ji was not fooled. Something is wrong. I can feel it. Just like before my mom died, I knew something was wrong then too. Nothing is wrong, Annabelle lied. Your uncle is careful, he knows what he is doing. But that night, after both girls were finally asleep, Annabelle sat alone in the guest house and let herself fall apart. She cried for the uncertainty, for the fear, for the life she had stumbled into that seemed determined to take away everyone she loved. She cried until she had no tears left, until she was just empty and exhausted. Then her phone rang, an unknown number. Her heart stopped. She answered it. Annabelle, Dong-soo's voice, strained but alive. Oh my God, are you okay? I have been trying to reach you for days. I am fine, it is done. Park is in federal custody. His entire organization is being rolled up as we speak. It is over, Annabelle. It is finally over. The relief hit her so hard she could not breathe for a moment. When are you coming home? Tomorrow. I am driving back tomorrow. I need to tie up a few loose ends here, but then I am coming home. To you. I love you, she said, the words spilling out. I love you so much and I need you to be safe and come home. I will, I promise. Get some sleep, okay? When I get back, we are going to start planning our future. A real future without this hanging over us. After they hung up, Annabelle sat in the darkness of the guest house and let herself believe, really believe for the first time, that they might actually have a chance. That love might be enough. That the story did not have to end in tragedy. She was still sitting there, smiling through fresh tears, when the sun came up. Dong-soo returned to Atherton 36 hours later, and when Annabelle saw him walk through the front door of the main house, she ran. She ran like her life depended on it, threw herself into his arms, and he caught her, lifting her off the ground and spinning her in a circle right there in the entryway. Minji and Claudia appeared from the game room, and Minji screamed with joy and joined the hug. Even Claudia, who had been trying to maintain teenage coolness throughout this whole ordeal, grinned and admitted it was good to have him back. That evening, after the initial excitement died down and the girls were occupied, Dong-soo sat down with Annabelle in his study and told her everything. How he had spent 8 days in Los Angeles meeting with FBI agents and federal prosecutors. How he had turned over every piece of evidence Sung-ho had provided, plus additional information from his own files. How the case against Park was so solid that the man had no chance of avoiding conviction. He is looking at life in prison, Dong-soo said, the satisfaction clear in his voice. And so are 8 of his top associates. Their entire operation has been dismantled. The people who killed my sister, who threatened you and Minji, they are all going to pay for what they did. What about Sung-ho? Annabelle asked. He cut a deal, immunity in exchange for his testimony against Park. He is relocating to Korea, and if he is smart, he will never come back to the U.S. I never want to see him again. And you, what happens to you now? Dong-soo reached across the desk and took her hand. I testified about my family's past activities as part of the deal. Complete transparency about everything I knew. In exchange, I received immunity for my cooperation and a clean slate for the future. The federal government is satisfied that I am genuinely moving away from the old business model. Infinity Holdings is officially completely legitimate now. No more gray areas. No more looking over my shoulder. Just clean business going forward. The relief on his face was profound. This was what he had been working toward for years, and it had finally happened. At enormous cost, but it had happened. So what now? Annabelle asked. Now we live, really live, without fear or threats. Now I keep the promise I made to myself to build something my niece can be proud of. And now I ask you if you will stay in my life permanently, not as an employee, but as someone I love who I hope loves me back. Annabelle smiled through tears that seemed to come so easily these days. I already told you I love you. What exactly are you asking me? I am asking if you will stay here in this house with me and Minji. I am asking if you will let me support you while you build your own dance studio, pursue your dreams that you gave up. I am asking if you will consider a future with me. It was not quite a proposal, but it was close. And sitting there in his study, with the California sun streaming through the windows and the weight of the last few months finally lifting, Annabelle realized she wanted that future more than she had wanted anything in years. Yes, she said simply. To all of it, yes. The next 3 months were a whirlwind of change. Annabelle and Claudia officially moved into the main house instead of the guest house. Claudia got her own room that was bigger than their entire apartment in Dali City had been, and she started at a private school that Dong-soo helped arrange. The teenager was suspicious of charity at first, but Dong-soo framed it as an investment in family, and that seemed to satisfy her pride. Minji thrived. With the threat gone and her uncle happier than she had seen him since before her mother died, the girl blossomed. She won first place at her school's dance showcase and started talking about maybe auditioning for a performing arts high school when she was older. She called Annabelle Aunt Annie now, and it made Annabelle's heart swell every time. And Dong-soo kept his promise about the dance studio. He found the perfect space in Palo Alto, helped Annabelle design it exactly how she wanted, and covered all the startup costs. When Annabelle protested that it was too much, he pointed out that he had more money than he could spend in 3 lifetimes, and he wanted to spend it on people he loved. That argument was hard to counter. The studio opened in early spring. Annabelle hired 2 other instructors and started with beginner classes for kids and teens. Within a month, they were at capacity and had a waiting list. Word spread about the dance teacher in Palo Alto who actually cared about her students, who taught technique but also taught joy, who understood that dance was about more than perfect form. Minji became Annabelle's assistant instructor for the younger kids' classes, and watching her work with children half her age was like watching her mother's legacy continue. The girl was patient and encouraging, pushing her students to be better while making them feel safe enough to try. On a Saturday afternoon in May, Annabelle stood in her studio watching her students warm up for their first recital. The space was full of parents and siblings, energy and excitement buzzing in the air. Claudia was in the audience, sitting next to Minji, both of them holding programs and whispering to each other. And in the back of the room, leaning against the wall with his arms crossed and a soft smile on his face, was Dong-soo. He caught her eye and winked, and Annabelle had to look away before she got too emotional. This was her dream, the thing she thought she had given up forever when her parents died and life became about survival instead of living. But here it was, resurrected and real, and she had this complicated, beautiful, impossible man to thank for it. After the recital, after all the students and parents had left and the studio was quiet, Dong-soo helped Annabelle clean up. It was domestic and normal, the kind of thing couples did together, and Annabelle loved it. They worked in comfortable silence, folding chairs and sweeping the floor, until everything was back in order. "You were amazing today," Dong-soo said. "Watching you teach, seeing how much those kids love you, I am so proud of what you have built here. I could not have built it without you. You would have found a way eventually. I just helped speed up the timeline." Annabelle set down the broom she had been using and crossed the studio to where Dong-soo stood. "Can I ask you something?" "Anything." "Do you remember the first night you saw me dance, in your conference room at midnight?" Dong-soo's expression softened. "I remember everything about that night. You were wearing your cleaning uniform and you had your hair in braids and you moved like you were the only person in the world who mattered. You were completely yourself, free and joyful and alive. I fell in love with you in that moment. I just did not know it yet. I was so embarrassed when I realized someone was watching." "I know. You screamed and dropped your cleaning cloth. It was adorable." Annabelle laughed, remembering the panic she had felt. If someone had told me that night that the man watching me from the shadows would become the love of my life, I would have thought they were insane. "Same. I did not think I had room in my life for love. I was too busy trying to fix my family's legacy and protect Minji. But you showed up and rearranged everything. Do you regret it, any of it?" Dong-soo pulled her close, his arms wrapping around her waist. "I regret that loving me put you in danger. I regret that you and Claudia had to live in fear for months. But I do not regret falling in love with you. I would make the same choice every single time." Annabelle rested her head against his chest, listening to his heartbeat. "I love you. I know I say it all the time now, but I want to make sure you know." "I know, and I love you, so much that it scares me sometimes. I spent so many years keeping people at a distance, not letting anyone get too close. But you walked right past all my defenses like they did not exist. You and your dancing and your genuine heart and your ability to bring joy back into Minji's life. You destroyed me in the best possible way." They stood there in the empty studio, holding each other while the last light of the day faded outside the windows. Annabelle thought about everything that had brought them to this moment. The late-night cleaning shifts, the business card she almost did not call, the threats and danger that could have destroyed them. The love that somehow survived all of it. "What are you thinking about?" Dong-soo asked. "That I used to clean office buildings at midnight, and now I own a dance studio in one of the richest cities in America. That my sister is thriving in a good school. That I get to teach kids the thing I love most. That I am standing in the arms of a man who loves me exactly as I am. That sometimes life surprises you in the most impossible ways." "The best impossible ways," Dong-soo agreed. He pulled back slightly to look at her, his expression turning serious. I need to tell you something. I have been waiting for the right moment, and I think this might be it. Annabelle's heart started beating faster. Okay. Dong-soo reached into his pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. Annabelle stopped breathing. I know we have only been together for a few months. I know that technically we should probably wait longer. But I also know that I do not want to spend another day without you being sure of how serious I am about our future together. He opened the box. Inside was a ring with a diamond that caught the studio lights and threw tiny rainbows across the walls. It was beautiful and elegant and absolutely perfect. Annabelle Wright, will you marry me? Will you be my wife and Minji's aunt and the person I build my life with? Will you dance with me, not just in studios but through everything life throws at us? Annabelle was crying happy tears that she did not bother trying to hide. Yes, yes, absolutely yes. Dong-soo slid the ring onto her finger and it fit perfectly. Then he kissed her, soft and sweet and full of promise. When they finally broke apart, both of them were smiling so wide it hurt. We should go tell the girls, Annabelle said. We should. They are going to lose their minds. Minji has been asking me when I was going to propose for the last month. She knew. She helped me pick the ring, and Claudia knew too. I asked her permission before I asked you. I wanted to make sure she was okay with this. The fact that he had thought to ask her sister, that he understood Claudia's opinion mattered to Annabelle, made her love him even more. What did she say? She said that you have been happier in the last few months than she has seen you since your parents died. She said I better not mess this up, or she would make my life miserable. And then she hugged me and said she would be happy to call me her brother-in-law. They drove back to Atherton together, Annabelle's hand resting on Dong-soo's thigh, her ring catching the light every time a car passed going the opposite direction. When they pulled into the driveway, Minji and Claudia were waiting on the front steps, clearly having been watching for them. The moment Annabelle got out of the car, both girls started screaming, let me see the ring." Annabelle held out her hand and the girls crowded around, admiring the diamond and jumping up and down with excitement. Minji threw her arms around Annabelle's waist. "You are going to be my real aunt now. This is the best day ever." Claudia hugged Dong-soo, which surprised him enough that he stood frozen for a second before hugging her back. "Welcome to the family," Claudia said. "Try to keep up. Annie and I can be a lot." "I am learning that," Dong-soo said with a laugh, "and I would not want it any other way." They went inside and ordered pizza and spent the evening planning. Minji wanted to help design Annabelle's dress. Claudia wanted to make sure she got to give a speech at the wedding. Dong-soo just wanted it to happen as soon as possible, which made Annabelle laugh because she had expected him to want some big elaborate event. "I do not need elaborate," he said. "I just need you. Everything else is extra." They got married 3 months later in the gardens behind the Atherton house. It was small and intimate, just close friends and family, exactly what both of them wanted. Minji and Claudia were both bridesmaids, wearing matching lavender dresses and crying through the entire ceremony. Mr. Cho walked Annabelle down the aisle since her father was not there to do it, and the gruff security chief was so honored he could barely speak. Dong-soo cried when he saw Annabelle in her dress, and she cried when she saw him waiting for her at the altar in his perfectly tailored suit. They said their vows in front of everyone they loved, promising to honor and cherish each other, to build a life based on trust and joy, and the kind of love that survived impossible odds. When the officiant pronounced them married and told Dong-soo he could kiss his bride, the kiss they shared was sweet and deep, and full of everything they had survived to get to this moment. The small crowd cheered, and Minji and Claudia threw flower petals, and somewhere in the warm California afternoon, Annabelle felt her parents' presence like a blessing. The reception was in the same gardens, with food and music and dancing. Annabelle and Dong-soo had their first dance to an old R&B song, the same one that had been playing the night he first saw her dance in his conference room. As they swayed together under string lights that made everything look magical, Dong-soo whispered in her ear, "I love you, Mrs. Kim. Thank you for dancing into my life." "I love you too. Thank you for watching." They danced until the stars came out, surrounded by the people they loved. building the beginning of a story that had started with a cleaning cloth and a midnight dance, and turned into something neither of them could have predicted. A story about finding love in the most unlikely places, about survival and hope, and the courage to build something new from the ashes of what came before. Annabelle stood in the wings of a small theater in San Francisco, watching Minji take the stage for her first solo performance. The girl was 14 now, taller and more confident, ready to audition for the performing arts high school she had been dreaming about. She had chosen to perform a piece she and Annabelle had choreographed together, a dance about loss and healing and finding joy again. As the music started and Minji began to move, Annabelle felt Dong-su's hand slip into hers. He had taken time off work to be here, would not have missed it for anything. They watched together as Minji told her story through movement, every gesture infused with the emotion and technique she had worked so hard to develop. When the dance ended and Minji took her bow, the small audience erupted in applause. Annabelle was crying again, proud tears this time, watching this girl who had been so broken a year and a half ago stand tall and confident on stage. "She is incredible," Dong-su whispered. "Her mother would be so proud." "She would be. You both raised an amazing kid." After the performance, they took Minji and Claudia out for dinner to celebrate. Claudia was thriving at her new school, talking about applying to colleges soon, maybe studying business so she could help Annabelle expand the dance studio to more locations. The girl who had been so lost and angry after their parents died had found her footing, had bloomed in the stability and love of their new life. Over pasta and breadsticks, the four of them laughed and talked about everything and nothing. They were a family, unconventional but real, built from loss and love and the determination to create something beautiful from pain. That night, after they got home and the girls went upstairs to their rooms, Annabelle and Dong-su sat in the living room watching the lights of the bay through the floor-to-ceiling windows. Annabelle was curled against his side, his arm around her shoulders, both of them content in the quiet. "I have been thinking," Dong-su said. "About what?" "About how that first night I came back to my office for a forgotten file. If my meeting had not been canceled, if I had stayed in LA, I would have missed seeing you dance. We would have never met. Our whole lives would be completely different." Annabelle tilted her head to look up at him. "Do you believe in fate, that we were supposed to meet?" "I do not know about fate, but I believe in chance and choice. Chance brought me back to that building at the exact moment you were dancing. Choice made me stay and watch instead of walking away. Choice made you call the number on my card. Choice made us fight for each other when things got dangerous. Maybe that is better than fate. Maybe choosing each other every day matters more than destiny." "I like that," Annabelle said. "I choose you. Every single day I choose you. And I choose you. My beautiful wife who dances like joy itself and who brought light back into my family's life." They sat in comfortable silence for a while longer, watching the city lights flicker in the distance. Somewhere out there were people cleaning office buildings at midnight, working multiple jobs to keep their families afloat, surviving instead of living. Annabelle had been one of those people. She understood that struggle in her bones. That was why she had started offering free classes at her studio for kids whose families could not afford the tuition. That was why she made sure to hire instructors who understood that dance was not just about technique, but about healing and expression and finding your voice when words were not enough. She was building something that mattered, with a man who supported her unconditionally, in a life she had never imagined possible. And every day, she remembered that midnight dance in an empty conference room, the moment everything changed, the beginning of a love story that had survived threats and danger and the weight of impossible circumstances. "What are you thinking about?" Dong-su asked, sensing her mind had wandered. "That I used to think love was something that happened to other people, that I was too busy surviving to have space for it in my life. But then you saw me dance when I thought no one was watching, and everything changed. For both of us, you changed everything for both of us." Annabelle thought about the journey that had brought them here, the late-night cleaning shifts and the business card she almost threw away, the first time she met Minji and held her while she cried, the threats and fear, and the moment she realized she loved Dong-su too much to walk away even when staying was dangerous, the proposal in her dance studio, and the wedding in the gardens, and this life They were building together one day at a time. "I love you," she said simply. "I love you too, always." And as they sat together in the house that had become home, with the girls they loved sleeping safely upstairs and their whole future stretching out before them full of possibility, Annabel let herself believe in happy endings. Not the fairy tale kind where everything was perfect and nothing ever went wrong, but the real kind where two broken people found each other and chose to heal together. Where love was not a solution to every problem, but a foundation strong enough to build on. Where a midnight dance could change the course of two lives and create something beautiful and lasting and true. She had been a cleaning woman dancing alone in an empty building. He had been a powerful man carrying the weight of his family's legacy and his sister's death. Together, they had become something neither of them could have been alone. A partnership, a love story, a family. And it all started with one man watching one woman dance and finding the courage to step out of the shadows and into the light.